So first, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's joining us tonight. I was really excited about this because there's been a lot of questions around Social Security disability, eligibility, and I was so happy when I got in contact with Ashley. Because I was like, you're the answer to my prayers. And this is Ashley Escareno. She has worked for Social Security, approving and denying eligibility claims. And so today she's going to talk about the process, eligibility requirements, as well as some of the programs, and just provide a little more feedback on that process. So this is Ashley. Thank you so much for joining us and for doing this for us. I will mute myself. I am going to keep the audio and the video turned off as we're recording, but if you have any questions, type them in the chat. And then you can take it away.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming to the presentation. Like Ruby said, I used to work for the Social Security Administration on the medical side, approving and denying claims. And then I ended up getting pancreatic cancer. And so then I kind of saw from the other side, like when you're trying to go through services and you're trying to deal with Social Security when you're not employed by them, how frustrating that can be. And that's actually why I wanted to make the change from denying claims to helping people get disability, because I know how it's scary when you need treatments. The treatments are way more than you can afford, and you're worried about how you're going to pay, everything else. So I can completely, kind of understand where you're coming from, and so I hope you find this presentation helpful. And I'm always open. We're kind of new to doing outreach presentations, and so I'm always working on it, and I want to improve. So if I miss something, or if you see a way that I can improve, please, I have my contact information at the end of the presentation. Please shoot me an email, because I would love to hear from you, because that's the only way I can improve. So we'll get started here. We're going to talk about Social Security and what their definition of being disabled is. Their definition is a severe impairment that is expected to result in death or last at least a period of 12 months, and that prevents someone from participating in gainful activity. And that would be like employment. Now here, I know primarily we're talking about children, but their definition doesn't change from adults to children. I'm sorry if you hear a little beep going off, I apologize. That's my, I'm a diabetic and my little sensor's going off, so I apologize for that. Gainful activity. And so sometimes people think, even someone that has a missing limb, they'll think, wow, okay, someone can't work with that. And actually, even if you're missing a limb or if you're paralyzed, even sometimes in those cases, you don't qualify for disability, because they have assistive devices and other things that they think in their minds that the person can use to still be gainfully employed. And so we're going to go over some of the things that in you guys' situations, where when you're dealing with someone that has a traumatic brain injury, what are some of the areas that they're going to be looking at? Okay. The medical listing for neurology is a disorder, and it must result in a marked limitation in physical functioning. So this could be anything. If they have trouble walking, if they do have a type of paralysis, anything like that. So they have to have a marked limitation, and at least physical. And then they're also going to look at other limitations in the following mental functioning area. Understanding. So they, as a parent, you'll want to keep logs from your teachers, from the school, if they're seeing therapists, on these areas, because this is what's going to make your case. Okay. So do they have trouble understanding? Do you have to explain things multiple times? If you do, if you have to show them how to do something multiple times before they get it, try to have the teachers, therapist, make sure they document that. Do they have trouble remembering? Do you have to set alarms for your child? Do you have to leave little sticky notes around the house? If so, make sure that's being documented, not only by you, but also when you go to the doctor, make sure that you're telling them that. A lot of times when people go to the doctor, they'll say, well, I told them once, and so it should be there. Well, your medical records and most often the only time that you get to kind of speak up for yourself and make your case. So if your kid has pain, if they have trouble in any of these areas, every single time you're at the doctor, make sure you notate that and tell them about it, so it gets in the medical records and it helps build your case credibility. An example I'll use for this, say someone's suffering from back pain. They go to the doctor, they're like, doctor, my back's killing me. But then every other time they go to the doctor, they never mention it. Well, it kind of looks like, okay, did it resolve? It must not be an ongoing issue. So make sure you work with the therapist and have them document and bring it up to the doctor every single time that you're in there. If they had trouble applying information, interacting with others, sometimes, you know, they might have terrible anxiety, happen to, you know, be in social situations. Maybe they'll do anything to avoid a social situation. Make sure that you get that documented. If they have trouble concentrating, if they have trouble persisting or maintaining pace, sometimes they might be, you know, able to really focus and they can do their homework, but it's only in like 10-minute spans. And then they need to go have like 30 minutes where they can do something else and then they can come back and concentrate again. It's really important for teachers, therapists to notate that. Now this, I hope this doesn't seem like kind of out of, you know, like, why is she placing this here? I couldn't find a place really to put this, but I want you to understand the path of the application and kind of what the process is, because if you understand what's going on, you're less likely to get frustrated by it. So first off, when you're going to apply for disability, you go to ssa.gov and you can click on disability and apply for disability. Now, if you don't have a account with ssa.gov, usually they'll have you fill out your contact information, social security number, and they'll kind of ask you some other personal information. Then they'll send you a card in the mail with a number on it in like a week. Then you go back to ssa.gov, type in that number, and then you can proceed. So just kind of expect that delay. Even though it's a pain, it is good that they do that because they're checking and verifying your identity. So just be prepared for that. When you apply, now keep in mind, when you apply, you can apply by yourself because a lot of you are probably in I don't know if the accident just happened or recent, but you are a group where most of you are going to get disability, and probably pretty easy compared to people that are, like I said, dealing with back issues or other type of issues. So by all means, I want to, but there is help available where you can hire someone like an advocate. So someone similar to what I do, and we do the whole application process for you just to take that off your plate. Like if you are currently in the hospital and you're going from doctor to doctor to doctor and you just don't have time to be bombarded by the minutia, maybe look into hiring an advocate or a representative that can do that for you. And when you're interviewing people, ask them, do you fill out the application for me? Now, granted, they will need to ask you this personal information because they won't know it. But it's different between, hey, can you give me this information versus you having to sit and input it all yourself. So make sure you ask that question if you're thinking about hiring somebody, how they work that out. Make sure when you apply, or if you're working with someone, make sure you have all your treating sources, contact information. A lot of times doctors work at different hospitals and different practices. Make sure you have the contact information for where your child is going, because if not, then when SSA or your representative requests those medical records, they can't find them. And not only does that cause delays in the case, but on behalf of Social Security, if you're applying by yourself, they're not going to go hunting down these records. They'll send one request. If it's not met, they kind of move on. So this is where the ball's kind of in your court to really make sure they have all the accurate information. Have the school, the address, social security numbers, banking info. Now, depending on what region you're in, each office kind of does this a little different. Sometimes they'll take all the banking information on that application. Other times you just kind of fill out and you just talk about where you work. They might ask questions like, how much are you earning? But when it comes to like, what's your bank account, where they're verifying, do you meet the resource limits? Sometimes they'll call you you and do that. It just depends on, are you in an area like Houston where there's a lot of people? Or are you kind of living somewhere where you can kind of get more one-on-one personal attention, and then they'll call you and handle it that way. But just have it on hand ready to go, so if they do want it. When you apply, and if you're applying by yourself on ssa.gov, they'll initially take your name, birthday, social security number, address, and then they'll ask you at one screen, would you like to stop and preserve your filing date, or do you want to keep going? And they'll apply you that's like a 10-digit number, a re-entry code. Make sure you write down that number, take a picture of it with your camera. I write it down several different places, because if you have to stop and go look up information and you don't have that re-entry code, it's lost. You can never get back in there. So make sure you jot down that number and keep it somewhere handy in case you have to go back in because you didn't have something that you needed. The field office, once you submit that application, now that application is going to take about 2 hours, okay? So just be prepared for that it's a long application process. And then in about a week or two, the field office is going to call. And if you're working with somebody, they're going to say, hey, did you know Ashley's filing for disability on such and such? Did you know this? Yes. Or they'll call you and say, hey, did you apply? And again, they're just verifying your identity to make sure that no fraud's going on. So just expect that call. Don't be worried when you see that Social Security is calling you. That's totally normal. Then the application, once you go through all, and we'll go over later on, don't worry about the resources and income and what they're looking at. But once you make it through that round and you get the green light to go ahead and apply for disability, then you move on to DDS, and that's where they do the medical portion of the claim. Now, right now, we were doing pretty good, but the other states were lagging behind in the DDS area. So now our DDS office is taking claims from other states, and it has almost come to a standstill. So where the medical portion used to take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, now it's taking 9 months to a year to get through the medical portion. So when you apply for disability, unfortunately, unless you certain cases that are very severe, they'll do a compassionate allowance. But in most cases, just know it's going to be a long, tedious process. So just be prepared for that. No one's doing anything wrong. No one's holding up the case. It's just the way it is. And that's unfortunate that it's taking that long, but that's what the time frame. I have a case right now that's been waiting 6 weeks just to even be assigned a worker. And so things are bad right now on the time frame. Once you can make it through the medical portion, you go back to the field office, and that's where the field office will call you. They'll go over if you're approved, they'll go over where would you like the money deposited, and they'll go over things like that, and that takes about 3 to 4 weeks as well. So you're looking at the end of everything about a year to maybe a little bit over a year. Now, if you have been, I don't know if there's anybody on here that's been denied disability. If you're being denied and you're filing an appeal, those are actually going pretty quick. So your process is going to be a lot quicker. If you appeal, you're probably going to get a hearing in 3 months or less. So that's good news if you've been denied. A lot of times these conditions, you have to have a time frame, a time duration to get approved. So if you've been denied, don't feel like all hope's lost. Maybe consult with somebody. Always reapply. You have 60 days to reapply, and always do that, even if you're kind of in your options like, well, should I pursue this right now? Maybe not. Go ahead and apply just to keep yourself covered. And you do always want to apply, because in Title 16 cases, let's say we apply in January this month, and say next January is when we get our denial letter and we file our appeal, and say in 6 months we're approved. Well, you're going to get back pay from January of 2022. So you're going to get all that back pay of when you would have been eligible, but you were denied. Okay, where if you do not file an appeal and you're like, well, I'm not going to file the appeal, I'll just file a new application, you're not going to get all those months of back pay. And the same thing, if you're on initial application, it takes the year, say you're approved, you will get from the date you applied in each month up until when you were finally approved. So you're probably looking about a year right now of back pay, and that's going to come in really helpful. I know with the medical costs and everything that you guys have going on to get that lump sum. So you'll get the month after application. I want to make sure I'm clear about this because I might have been confusing. If you were to apply this month and say you're approved in a year, you wouldn't get this month, but you'd get February on. Okay, so it's the month after application. So you'll get that pay starting the month after application. And at the end, if I've confused anybody, I'll go back over it and just ask me. And I'll try to clear that up. But back pay is very important, and can be very useful. Okay, SSI Title 16 is based on income and assets. Individuals from birth until retirement can be eligible for this. The family assets have to be less than, now here I hope, because I kept trying to read one, single parents. You can have up to 4,000 total in assets. So you get 2,000 for yourself. So if you're employed, if you have a bank account, anything like that, you can have up to $2,000. And then for the child that you're applying for, you get an extra $2,000 to equal $4,000. Now, parents in a two-parent household or a parent and a guardian, you can get up to 5,000. So you get 3,000 because you're married, and then you still get the 2,000 for the kid that you're applying for a total of 5,000. And down at the bottom says, note these amounts are different for adults applying for SSI. I wanted to specify this because if you do not qualify for Title 16 right now, and you're watching this thinking, okay, I'm going to apply for my child when they turn 18, then the limits are what the child would be. So the child would only be able to have resources up to $2,000 if they're 18 and older. Okay, if they're married, then it would be the $3,000 limit for kids that you're looking for a little bit down the road. So you don't get this extra cushion of the $2,000 on both sides if your child is, if you're looking to apply when they're 18 or older. Okay. Here's what they look at with resources. These are just a couple of the things that they look at. They do not count the home that you live in. So you could live in $1 million home. If that's where you live, that's not going to count against you. You can have one vehicle in your name. Now, if you're the head of a household and you have your car, your name's on the title of your wife's car or husband's car, you have teenagers, they have cars, your names are on those titles, the Blue Book value of every car except for the first car will count against your assets and resources. So a way to get around that, a lot of times parents will sign over the title to the car to their kids if they're 18 and older. So sometimes, like if you have your mom's cars in your name, there's a lot of different family situations going on. If they're able to carry their car title in their own name, go ahead and do that so it doesn't count against you on the resources. They do not count personal items. They're not going to ask you about how much jewelry you own, how much is your engagement ring, furniture, anything like that. That will not count against you. And then what does count, again, the additional cars, financial accounts within your bank account, if you have stocks, life insurance, burial plots. Now you are granted where a certain percentage of the burial plots wouldn't be counted against you, but the majority of it is. And so it just gets very tedious in the weeds. So basically think of anything you could liquidate for money is what they're going to be looking at, okay? Additional real estate property. This comes up a lot if you inherit property and you don't live on the property, and it can't be a second home. That will count against you. So just be mindful of that. Okay, so income deeming. This is where this is the book on income deeming, is like 500 pages. It's confusing of all the different scenarios that can happen. So income deeming only applies when you're applying for a child that's under the age of 18. And so the way they look at it is the family money, and some of the money that you're earning, goes for the use of your child. And so that's what it is. That's kind of what it boils down to. Some of your income and resources will count towards your child's resource limit, and that's the deeming. Deeming is considered when a child is under the age of 18. And so that's why, say you don't qualify right now, when they turn 18, usually they do, because income deeming comes off and then they're considered their own. If they live at home with their parents or guardians and lives at school but comes home on the weekends, this is all situations where income deeming would apply, and how much it goes towards it. This is where you can call the Social Security office, or when you file your application, just so you're not worried about all the ins and outs of it, because it's a lot to know. Go ahead and apply, and then they'll call you, they'll go through it, and they'll ask you about your specific situation, and then that's how you'll find out whether or not you're eligible or not. Don't worry about trying to look it up in advance. Don't even worry about it. Don't do that. Go through the application process, and then they'll ask about your specific situation, and then that's how you'll find out whether or not you fall under the income and resource limit and the income deeming. Okay, so for Title II, this is worked on based on work credits. So this is for people that they don't qualify for Title 16, and they're thinking, how's my child going to be able to make it when they get older? So here, children can draw upon a parent's work history if the parents are retired and at full retirement age. So if they took early retirement and they're like 58, they have to be at full retirement age. A child can draw upon a parent's work history if they're deceased or if they themselves are disabled. Adult child must be over the age of 18, and their impairment had to have begun before they turn the age of 22. Okay, so that's really the key factor. Did the impairment happen before they turned 22? Benefits for a child qualifying under a parent's record. The income and assets are no longer a factor. They could have higher monthly payments. Usually Title II does carry higher monthly payments. And beware that a child will transition from Medicaid to Medicare after 2 years of receiving SSDI. So a lot of times, keep in mind, if say your child does qualify under SSI and you're working, sometimes when you turn 18, you want to get on DA, the disabled adult child, transition over and draw on your work history, because then their benefits go up, and like I said, their monthly payments most likely will go up. But keep in mind that they will, after 2 years, give up the Medicaid and go to Medicare. And the only reason I'm pointing that out is, depending on what state you're in, sometimes then the child has to pay deductibles. They have like a certain amount they have to reach before the insurance really starts kicking in. So in certain states, it's not the extra money you get financially from moving over to a DAC actually ends up hurting you on the medical side. So that's where you would want to probably call your local field office, where they know all the ins and outs of Medicaid and what the rules are and what's happening in your state, and ask them before you just like, oh, hot dog, yes, extra money, we need that money. And believe me, I know you need the money, but when you're dealing with prescriptions and things like that, but sometimes the coverage isn't as well. So look into that before you switch programs. Here we're talking about savings accounts. So a lot of times you're thinking, and I think Ruby asked me this, a lot of times maybe you hold fundraisers and things like that, where you are trying to save long-term for your child or save up for a specific item, and you're afraid that's going to put you over the resource limit. There is something called an ABLE account. It's an ABLE savings accounts are special bank accounts for individuals with disabilities where the funds don't count as assets or resources for the purpose of SSI, and it won't affect your benefits or your Medicaid. I actually reached out to this program because I'm going to see if they'll do a presentation for me just so I can learn, because there are certain caveats how much you can put in. I think you can put in, it was 15,000 a year. Now it's 16,000, I believe. But there's certain rules about what the money can be used for. And that's where I'm a little confused. And so if I can have them do a presentation for me, I'll get with Ruby and we'll pass that information along to you guys, since they really know it and how we could utilize that for your child's benefit. But right now, my general knowledge of the program is that you can put money into this account every month. And like I said, up to $16,000, and it won't count against your income and resource limits in for the future. Now, someone told me this, that be careful of how much you spend in there, because you know, God forbid, if the person that has the account passes away, you don't get that money back. That's what someone told me. It ends up going to cover Medicaid cost. Now, that's what I heard, and I wanted to tell you guys about that, because that's a big deal if you can't have access to that money. And again, I'll work with Ruby if I hear back from them, and if we can get a presentation on that where we can ask that, because I'd never heard that before. And I definitely want you to know about that. And so I'll keep you guys in the loop on, but check out, now there are ABLE accounts with the federal government. Make sure, I think, Ruby, is everybody here from Texas? Do you know?
I believe so. We may have other states, but I think the majority may be from Texas.
Okay. Okay, make sure you're looking at the Texas ABLE accounts, because each state, it varies just a little. And with SSI, it's a federal program, but depending on what state you're in, you may actually earn more, because certain states kick in more money towards SSI. Texas, unfortunately, doesn't really do that, but like in California, other states, they can earn a couple extra $100 just because of the state that they live on top of the federal amount. So make sure you're looking at the Texas rules there. Working in disabilities. So if you have a child that's close to starting to work, or keep this in mind down the road, there is a program called Ticket to Work. I don't work in that area, but what they do is get involved with them if your child starts to work, and they will sit down with you kind of like as a financial type planner, and they'll tell you this is how much you can earn before it starts affecting your disability. If you earn this much, your amount will go down this much, and they make sure that you don't have overpayments. Please, if you start earning, if your child starts earning money, if anything in your life changes financially, make sure you keep Social Security in the loop on that, because people come to me all the time, payment, and it happens with people that have cognitive issues. They've been on Social Security since they were little. They started working. They at first went to the Ticket to Work. They got the green light. You're good to go. They got a raise, or they got a promotion. They didn't think to contact Social Security to tell them that. And then guess what? And it never happens in a timely way. It happens years down the road. Social Security comes knocking at your door and is like, hey, you know, you got a promotion 3 years ago and you started earning too much money. Now you owe us all that money. I just got a call 2 weeks ago from someone that owes over $20,000, because he just didn't even think, you know, to notify them, and it wasn't even that much. But if you go over the limit that you're allowed to work each month by $2, they're going to want that whole month back. So they don't go off of instant and calculate, okay, you were only off $2, so we're, you know, you only owe us $2 for the 3 years each month. You know, they want the whole lump sum, which right now I think is $800 and something. So they're going to want that whole lump sum back for every single month that you were earning over the allotment. So make sure you keep them in the loop, so you don't ever have any overpayment issues. And right now in Texas, I have been trying to find people that work overpayment so that these people can have some type of help working their way through this, and nobody does them. Lawyers don't do them. I've reached out to everybody. And it's really hard to find assistance with overpayments. So you really don't want to go down that road. So check out, just if you're taking notes, just write down ticket to work. You can look it up and find out how to get involved with that program if your child's starting to work or you have some type of financial change. SSA wants you to be able to work, and they are very supportive of allowing trial work periods and the ability to go back to work and keep your benefits. And it's generous. It's so say you have a child and they get out and they've maybe been in a vocational rehab class, during high school, and then they're able, wherever they were interning, they took them on permanently and they got a full-time job. A lot of times you're allowed up to a year to be able to work and see if that's going to work out for you. Can they keep the job? Do they get too tired? Does the disability, end up with the member maintaining persistence and pace? Are they able to keep it? And a lot of times for up to a year, you can maintain your benefits and the amount that you're earning at work. So they're very generous in that area. So we always encourage, if people can work, definitely go. It's good for socialization, a whole bunch of various other reasons. But don't feel, oh, I can never work again, or if I get my child on disability, I'm, determining at this point that they can never work. Don't have that fear. That's not the case. If they do get gainfully employed and they go through their trial work period, and let's just say they work there for 2 or 3 years and maybe there's a change or the company closes and they need to get back on benefits, they'll be able to get back on benefits. So don't have that fear either. Okay, so let's see. Other resources that are available. I don't know if anybody's been in contact with you guys yet, but they have state vocational rehabilitation programs here in Texas. We have great ones. Now each region does things a little differently. In the Panhandle, if anybody's here from Ruby's area, the state vocational programs are great up there. They have camps for younger kids during the summer where they can work on socialization. And then as the kids get older, they actually, it's a camp during the summer as well, but they'll teach them different job skills, and then the kids intern at different places. And so always check out the state vocational rehabilitation program in your area and see what they offer, because they offer a lot of great resources. If your kid needs certain technology, if they need certain assistive devices, a lot of times they will pay for that. So definitely check them out and get connected with your state agency on that. And then get involved with as many nonprofits as you can. This one, Ruby was telling me a little bit more in depth about what this program does, and it's fantastic. And other ones kind of focus more on socialization, and other ones focus on job skills. And so they kind of, can all overlap. So, check out and see how many programs that they may be able to get involved in. If your kid has other impairments, like we discussed earlier before we started recording, if your kid now has a visual impairment, not only make sure that Social Security focuses on the vision impairment because they can earn more money down the road, but then you might be eligible for the Division for Blind Services. If they have like different autistic, if they have different symptoms from the TBI that cause other things, look into then what that is, even if it's not the primary impairment, and see maybe you can get hooked up with resources that way as well. The difference, if you're looking to hire someone to help you navigate your way through Social Security disability, I want you to know the difference between a lawyer and an advocate. One is obviously the lawyer went to law school, and they usually do like workman's comps, or people had been injured at work. They'll handle various other types of cases as well. Advocates often have a background working for the Social Security Administration. Like I worked in the medical determinations, other people work from the field office and things like that. And they're able to do the exact same thing, except advocates cannot represent people at the highest federal level. They can do everything from initial up to the highest level, and then a lawyer has to take over. If you've appealed 3 times and you're working your way up the circuit and it gets to the federal level, then a lawyer has to take it. But an advocate can do anything from initial to that level. Always check to make sure they have an EDPNA. And what that means is the Social Security Administration has made them take a test showing that they understand the rules, the laws, the policies, and do background checks and everything like that. And they're able to be paid from Social Security themselves. So for instance, if you were to hire me, and we work your case and say your case is approved, no money comes out of your pocket at any time. If your case is denied, you owe nothing. What happens if you're approved is that a lawyer and an advocate, and SSA has set these limits. We don't personally set them. The Social Security Administration sets it at 25% of past due benefits. So remember earlier when we were talking about you can get back pay from the month after you apply to when you're approved. So your lawyer or your advocate would get 25% of the past due benefits. And I want to be clear because one time I did a presentation and people thought that then the lawyer or the advocate received 25% ongoing of their monthly. No, it's only a past due benefits. And then all money from that day going forward would be you and your family's money. So that's kind of how advocates and lawyers work. And now I do want to point out, if you happen to go to the very federal level, sometimes they'll do a fee petition to try to get more money, but right now it's capped at $6,000. But if you're on an initial or an appeal, don't worry, it wouldn't be that much. It's only 25% of past due benefits up to $6,000. And then let's talk about some documentation tips. Keep records of teacher conferences, evaluations, testing scores, and behavioral reports. Now, as a mom myself, I'm always, you get stuff from the school and you don't know where it ends up. Make sure maybe you buy a binder or a box and just make sure you just keep everything because that'll help you down the road. Keep logs with the amounts of times and duration. Turn that into your doctor so it gets put into your medical records. And make sure you list how often it happens, when it happens, how long does it last. Like say they have an emotional outburst, it occurs 3 times a week for at least an hour. And then once I get them calmed down, is there some type of re-gearing phase? That would kind of be like, say you have a kid that has more of the physical, has some type of physical symptoms. Say they can walk for an hour, but after they do that, they have to lay down and recover for 2 hours. Make sure you're kind of keeping logs of how long that happens, how long it lasts, and what the recovery period is, because that will help you build case credibility down the line. Report medicine side effects. This is a big one that people would get denied for. Is your doctor prescribes something, you can't take it, it makes your kid nauseous, it makes them too sleepy or whatever it is. Make sure you go back to the doctor and say, my child cannot take this medication, here's why. Can you do something else? Because if it's not in the notes, then no one knows that there's a problem. They're like, oh, well, they may have, bad migraines, but if they're taking their medicine, they wouldn't have migraines. That's how the SSA looks at it. Now, obviously, that's not realistic, but they look at it, the doctor prescribed it, and if you're not compliant, everything would be rosy if you did comply. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And then here's my contact information. And again, I'd love any feedback that you have for me on ways that I can improve. And then I think Ruby and I will open it up for some questions. And now, Ruby, I don't know if I'm tech savvy enough to figure out how to get out of the screen. So I might have you have to read the chats because I can't see them.
Okay, I have some chats here. Okay. And I'll start off by the first one. Is it incorrect that when a child has cerebral palsy and is legally blind, they get disability issued immediately? It says, I'm sure they have to qualify financially as well, which they know they do, but instead of having to wait, shouldn't the child get disability services immediately?
Okay, now and I don't have the list with me. There is a list that if you have, and I work with a lot of cancer cases, if you have a certain type of cancer, maybe cerebral palsy is on that list, or if you have a certain diagnosis, you're considered, pretty much right away. Now, in a lot of those cases, I would proceed with caution because sometimes in those cases, and I'm not sure if cerebral palsy is one of them, I'll make a note and look. you're assumed eligible, assumed that you'll be approved. But say something comes up and the doctor's notes isn't exactly what they thought they were going to be, and when they look at the medical records, they can't make that allowance, and you've been collecting, again, that might be a situation where they're going to come back and want that money back. And the only reason I say that is, as I mentioned earlier, I had pancreatic cancer. I was on feeding tubes. I was in a terrible way. But when you read my medical records, I mean, they couldn't believe that I survived the surgery. I had a drastic surgery, and they're like, well, we didn't, you were on palliative care, you survived. It's amazing. So when you read my medical records, I mean, you think I was running marathons when I was in a wheelchair, feeding tubes and things like this. So as a parent, make sure you go in and request the medical records every now and again and really look and see what's in there. Because if they've had a traumatic brain injury, say they were never expected to talk again, and then all of a sudden they're talking. Well, even though they may only be saying 2 or 3 words, the doctor might just be glowing like, well, we didn't even think this was possible, that they would talk at all. And things like that can go against you and hurt you. So make sure you're really looking at those medical records and seeing what's in there. But that's what I would say about cerebral palsy with the allowance. If you're assumed allowed, you can say, no, I'll wait until I'm approved to start collecting, or you can collect in the meantime. But if they determine down the road that you weren't eligible for whatever reason, they could come back and want that money back.
Thank you. The next question, the same person had it as, what is a compassionate allowance? If you can speak on that a little bit more.
Yes, compassionate allowance is the part when I was talking about the disability expecting to result in death. Usually a compassionate allowance is someone that isn't expected to live more than a couple of months. So they really push those cases to the front of the line to try to get them the medical care that they need to continue their care, and the financial money to be able to, for their loved ones to be able to put their lives together. And so not every case. So please, if cerebral palsy is on the compassionate allowance, there are some that aren't expected to result in death. But the norm is, if you're a compassionate allowance, is you have something that's expected to be life-ending.
Earlier we had one that said, should the account be for my child, or do I make an account for myself and then later add my child?
Oh, that's a good question. I think you create it on yours, and then when you go in, it says, I'm applying for someone else. So you click on disability, it says, are you applying for yourself or someone else? You put someone else, and then the next question is a minor child. And so then that's how you add child information. I will double check on that. Let me make a note, and if I'm wrong, I'll get with Ruby so she can contact you. But I think it's under yours. Okay. Okay, I made a note. I'll get with you tomorrow, Ruby, on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me see. The next one is my issue with I don't know if this is SSI or SSDI, is when I worked, I did not qualify for checks, and now that I'm unemployed, I qualify for the full amount. Plus, I would have to pay back with overpayments each year. So I think that's talking about the overpayment issue that you had brought up earlier.
Yes, and so they will, the more you get paid, the less your benefits will get. And then your benefits end up dwindling until you don't have any financial benefits. Now, that's where I would advise you to talk to the Ticket to Work program, because hopefully they can ease your mind and really work through like, hey, this is the amount that you need to look for. If you hit this amount, then you're going to be, on the list maybe for an overpayment. That's not really my area that I really focus on, but that would be my advice, is to get with them, and they'll be able to tell you like, hey, once you start getting to this level, you need to be careful. And then there are certain things that, depending ways to make your monthly income less. Like if you have assisted devices, if you can't drive and you had to take public transportation, they know all the ways to start making your income less to keep you eligible. So definitely get with them on that. And usually, like if you are like a traumatic brain injury and anything neurological, that's different than when someone has a physical impairment. So a lot of times you'll hear someone that has a physical impairment, they started working and then they needed to go back to benefits and then they were denied. Well, that's different because someone like if they have a back impairment, but say they worked for 2 years and they were at a grocery store stacking shelves, and then, you know, something happened, they lost their job. Well, the SSA looks like that. Well, okay, your back allowed you to work for 2 years stocking shelves. So, you know, you may have lost that job, but then you could do another job where, you know, at the same, you know, physicality. Or a traumatic brain injury, you know, it's ongoing, and usually, not in all cases, but sometimes like you have jobs that might have different requirements than someone that doesn't have a traumatic brain injury. Like maybe you have longer time to complete a report. Maybe, you know, you don't have to do certain things. Well, they'll take that into consideration. So it'll be easier for someone with a neurological issue to get back on benefits than someone that just had the physical impairment. And make sure you have your employers document that, because some employers like Luby's, I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, the cafeteria, they'll make these really awesome jobs for these, you know, and they really help with assistive devices and allowing extra time to do things, where another cafeteria wouldn't make those same allowances. And so you really want to get that documented to protect yourself. Like, hey, you know, I was given these extra, the extra help, extra assistance, more time to do things, and just to cover yourself and help argue if they're like, oh, well, they did this job, you know, so they wouldn't qualify, just as a way to protect yourself.
Okay.
They call those employer statements. Yeah.
And I had another question, and this is with regards to documentation. Do you have any advice for those families who say, well, I know I'm not going to qualify because my income or resources are above the limit. And so even if, let's say they did make more than the 5,000 or had more than the 5,000 in resources, but all the other expenses, is there any way to word that in the application?
So the applications kind of really cut dry. Sometimes there are certain ways that, I don't know how to word it. People do certain things to be eligible that aren't considered legal necessarily, where they have to move money around to make. Now obviously if you're way over income and resources, I mean you don't qualify, but those people that are really borderline, sometimes there are ways to pay off extra debts that you had to then get underneath the income limits. Now you can't go to your bank and say the limit's $3,000 and you have 5,000, you just make a withdrawal for $2,000 and then go apply for disability. That's not going to work. That's going to get flagged. But if you had a card note and you put $2,000 down on it to help pay it off, you know, that's something that is kind of a way of getting around if you're borderline.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And those are all the questions that we have now. I'm not sure if you'd want to open it up, or if anyone has any additional questions they want to type in the chat.
Sure. Yeah, I'm open if anybody is wants to get on. And again, if you want to protect your privacy, and contact Ruby later, and then she can get with me or email me directly. However you want to handle that, I'm fine with that too, if you're uncomfortable talking publicly about it.
Okay. Well, I think do you have any more information that you'd like to share? Otherwise, I feel like we could stop recording and then just kind of
Yeah.
Mhm.
My advice is always just get with the field office. If you're really worried about the income resources or the income deeming, and just go through the process and get with them, because they'll look at your specific situation to see if you qualify or not. And a lot of times people will do that part before they reach out to a lawyer or an advocate or whatnot, just because to protect their information, where you're not then, okay, I'm giving it to the lawyer and then the lawyer's contacting Social Security and then it's going through all these channels. Sometimes people start the process, see if they're eligible before they bring people on, just to protect their private information. And that's what I would say is always, if you're not sure, it doesn't hurt to go down and find out and have them look at your specific case and take a shot at it. If you're looking at this and you're like, oh, I don't think my kid would quite qualify, maybe they're not severe enough, or maybe we're over the income amount, still for your child, keep all those records of the school notes, behavioral therapy notes and things like that, because conditions can sometimes, we hope they don't, but sometimes they can worsen over time, or sometimes something else happens that then triggers something. And if you're trying to prove that your kid became disabled before the age of 22 on a Title II, those records are going to be really critical. So that's my advice, is just keep all those records, because they might be needed down the road for your child.